Hey, welcome to another episode of the Get More Students podcast. I'm your co-host, Alex Asher, and CEO of LearnCube.
And I'm Herbert Gerzer, founder of herbertgerzer.com.
And today we are going to focus on a pretty exciting topic, how to attract more students with scroll-stopping copy. And Herb and I were talking about this topic because every language school and tutoring company needs to nail, first of all, their advertising and promotional copy. And it's hard.
Absolutely.
It's definitely hard for me. What to write, how do I create a hook? How do I create a great headline? I'm really worried about getting it wrong or being too salesy. And look, and I know this from my own experience because, I have to write my own copy for LearnCube. And actually, I find it really difficult. And just to give you a bit of background, so LearnCube specializes in helping online language schools and tutoring businesses to grow with our virtual classroom and our online school solutions. And so we have to create this copy. And as I say, I actually find it hard sometimes that I definitely need to ask Herbert, who is an expert on this, and writes ad copy not just for himself and for his digital marketing agency, but literally on behalf of hundreds of language schools and education businesses. And so that's why I'm so excited about this conversation, not because I'm an expert, but actually because Herbert is, and this is his craft. And Herbert, I'm really excited to kind of learn more during this session.
Me too. I love this topic, Alex. I think it is something that is not on a lot of people's radar. People might not think it's very important, what you write in an ad, the body of an ad, but it really can make the difference between someone just gleaning over an ad and continuing scrolling, or actually taking in your message and clicking on your ad, which of course is the goal.
Yeah, I think also, even just sort of my own experience, it's quite easy when you're starting out to feel like you're making progress with advertising just by the number of, say, impressions or something. Like there's always a vanity metric that one of the platforms is willing to tell you about that kind of makes you feel somewhat good about your advertising. But often it's not just about like, hey, yeah, I got my brand or my message in front of another person. The whole idea is you're wanting to get some kind of response. And I think that's what we're going to be talking about today as well, Herbert.
Exactly. The difference between just general brand advertising versus direct response advertising. And really the goal of copywriting, it is an art form, and it really is crafting words for the sole purpose of conversion, getting people to take a specific action, the action that you want them to take. So yes, we're not going to talk about brand awareness to get in front of the most eyeballs. A lot of companies spend millions of dollars to do that. But we assume you want to get the most bang for your buck in terms of ad spend and ad budget. So creating compelling copy can really make you stand out from the pack and get users' eyeballs onto your school.
That's it. And also speaking from somebody that's made a bit of a hash of it myself on many an occasion, what do people get wrong when they're doing ad copy? What are the things that we forget?
Right. A lot of people forget to put themselves in their customers' shoes. And then they think about themselves or their company, their school, and how amazing their school is, how great their teachers are, which is all well and good, and you should include that at one of the stages of the copy. But you really need to know what is pushing your target audience's pain points, what are their desires, what are their end goals, what are they looking for in a language course or a tutoring company, and including that in your copy, especially at the beginning, to capture their attention.
That's it. So even so, I think what you've told us first of all is maybe just they start with a very kind of superficial view of what a student would want or what a customer would want, which often just reflects what they want as a school or a tutoring agency rather than what's the outcome that the student's really looking for. Like, it's a lot deeper than just, hey, they're trying to learn. I offer learning. Here we go.
Exactly. And, I see ads from education companies every single day, and usually they're using quite short ad copy, maybe one sentence or 2 or 3 sentences max. And basically they go like, we have the best teachers, enroll in our courses. That's it.
Yeah, because you're thinking about impressions, right? You're just like,
you're like, oh, I need to sell.
Yeah.
You need to enroll in our language courses because they're the best. But you're providing no proof or backup. You're not telling a story why your courses are so highly rated. And that's where you can really, dive into the, emotional side of people's kind of decision making, and grab their attention through long copy.
One thing I was just thinking on there, and just to kind of clarify for our listeners, is there is a difference though in terms of you will write different ads and have different options depending on what platform and what purpose you're doing your ads for. So, Herbert, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to be talking particularly about maybe with the background, like you might be writing a copy for a Facebook ad or something where you can do longer copy rather than a Google search ad where you are very limited by characters and therefore short copy might be your only option. But again, you might have some ideas on it. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's why, at our agency, we love working with Facebook and Instagram in terms of getting that awareness from people who have not heard about your school or your company before, because you have the ability and the creative freedom to write basically as many words as you want in that copy.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to be assuming that we've got not a tiny limitation of characters, and we can give this a good go. So, couple of things that we've got wrong, or now we know that would be mistakes or things to look out for. Not putting yourself in the customer's shoes, using short copy, maybe it not being very emotive. What else can you tell us about the things that people maybe forget or get wrong?
Right. Using complicated or technical words in your copy. Maybe you're describing a course or your teaching method, but you've got to be careful not to use complicated, difficult words for people to understand. And also using those types of words in long blocks of text, which are very hard to scan. So you want to use easy, simple words, in short sentences. So it is much easier to read. You also, want to make sure you distinguish between features and benefits of your school and your courses. And I think a lot of people have difficulties when differentiating between one of their benefits and one of their features, Alex. Oh, and definitely to have the ad copy match with what the user will see and read after they click on your ad. So what is on your landing page needs to match with the text in your ad.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's one thing having something that somebody will take an action on, but if it leads to something totally different that they'll never take an action on, then that's a waste of everybody's time and money.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you've really set this out for us, Herbert. So not putting self in other people's shoes, short copy, it's not emotive, jargon, long blocks of copy, confusing what a feature and benefit is, disjointing or creating almost like a bait and switch. Now, I can definitely say and put my hand up that I've done a lot of these areas. But the good thing is, even talking with you, Herbert, this is something we can all improve. Like, this is a skill. This is something that we could all improve on.
Takes practice.
And so what I'm excited about is in this next section, you telling us through what to do and maybe how to go about even starting building some of these skills.
Right. I mean, let me give you some quick strategies that you can implement to really persuade people to take that action that you want them to take. A great way is in the first line of your ad copy. Basically, the hook is to call them out. Maybe you're calling out their problems. Maybe you're calling out their desires, and you want to be really specific. Not like, do you want to improve your English? I mean, everyone wants to improve their English, right? But do you struggle presenting sales figures in front of your colleagues? I mean, that's extremely specific, and you will only get to that specificity if you know your target audience inside and out and know what their pain points and desires are. And I just use a question in that hook, and using yes questions are fantastic. Creating that kind of positive effect of the reader or the visitor saying yes to that question in their mind. And, every yes is closer to a yes for them to enroll in one of your courses.
I really like that. And I think, particularly because, again, what you meant, and by the way, this is Herbert's tagline of this scroll stopping copy. But the whole idea of this calling out is otherwise anything that is not to do with me, because it's all about me.
Absolutely.
As a student, as a customer, as a consumer, it's all about me. So if I'm looking through anything, if I'm watching TV, if I'm on my screen, anything, it's like, is this relevant to me? And so the whole time I'm just like actually trying to get rid of noise, like not relevant, not relevant, not relevant. And so when you're calling out my biggest problems and desires, if it's a general thing, I'm like, yeah, I'm learning English. So what? It doesn't tell me why I should stop and listen. But as soon as you mention something really specific, I'm like, whoa, my brain's like, oh, I need to listen. I need to engage. I need to figure out what else this person has to say. So I think that's where all of this sort of comes from, is that first headline, that first hook is all about calling out my problem and desires.
Absolutely. And also creating emotion. That's a huge part of it. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a positive emotion. You can also play on negative emotions, fear of missing out, fear of not getting the career promotion because of their language skills, or playing on some of their insecurities. But, always positioning then your product, your course, your school as the solution to getting them towards their end goals. So again, being really specific about that works extremely well.
And you're really creating a beautiful, like a contrast there, right? You're saying, and actually I can imagine why you might want to use some of those negative emotions is to help identify a pain, help identify the action needs to take place. Because also, if everyone's comfortable, if everyone's just happy doing their thing, then there's no reason to stop, no reason to change. So sometimes maybe those negative emotions, if they're done very well and show a strong solution, a positive emotion that can contrast with that, then it can be really effective. Is that kind of, do you actually have any examples of that? And let's use language education as an example.
Sure. I mean, creating more of it's not necessarily negative, but more of a controversial emotion, like you've been learning English the wrong way. That's like, oh, okay, which way is that? That's something that really captures people's attention. And then obviously in continuing in the ad copy, you would call out the ways that people have been learning up to now, whether or not they're the right ways to learn. That's up to you. You've been learning through 2D language apps that really don't get you anywhere. You don't get to practice your speaking skills, and maybe you've tried out this and this platform, and you're not satisfied with the teachers there. You're building up that, I've had that experience before. That hasn't been a good experience. So tell me how I can improve that. And then further down the copy, you would introduce your solution, your school, your offer, to solve all their problems.
And it's so good as well, because you're like, the more I'm reading, the more I'm thinking, kind of going back to your yes thing, it's like, oh wow, this person really understands me. I need to know who this person is. Now it's of course the school or who it is that's doing the advertising, but the longer I'm engaged with that and the more you can help me read a story that fits my profile, I'm like, oh wow, so you're actually made for me, not for the general language learner or the general add your subject here tutoring service. That's very good. So tell us more. We've talked about calling out problems and desires, writing long copy, and I think you kind of discussed that. We've talked about creating that emotion, using that hook. Tell us more around what are the other kind of strategies that we can use to persuade more people to take action?
Absolutely. Again, being descriptive and using more descriptive words and not always the words that everyone else uses. For example, like a word like exciting, you might use thrilling. You could use the word boring, or you could use something like mind numbing. These are all more descriptive words that evoke emotion and action. So get out your thesaurus and come up with other emotive words. Again, using short, simple words. You should really write how you speak. It should be casual, conversational, and really at an easy level in order to capture everyone's attention. Also, presenting your benefits and the solutions. And I have a good exercise with that because a lot of language schools and tutoring companies struggle to distinguish between features and benefits. A feature might be, for example, native speaking teachers. And let's face it, most language schools have native speaking teachers. But why is this feature notable? You can learn the real language that people speak every day. You'll be understood.
It might be about the culture, it's about them bringing both the language skills, but also the cultural understanding.
Exactly. And then you have to ask yourself, what is this kind of pain point, the core pain point this problem solves? Maybe it's feeling embarrassed or misunderstood in certain situations. And why does your potential customer need this? Maybe it's to build their confidence in, speaking the language. So really the benefit of having native speaking teachers is getting more confidence in everyday situations when you communicate. And so these are the sorts of kind of exercises you can do in order to really make your ads stand out from the sea of ads that are quite, the same.
I'm just wondering if there are, this is kind of just coming off the top of my head here, Herbert, but it feels like maybe just asking, when I've heard of this kind of technique of just asking the same question lots of times to get to an answer. Sort of like, we often know
why.
Why do I care?
Yeah, exactly.
It's because it does, maybe can we go through that very, very briefly? I think you've already said the things, but if I was like, we have native teachers and why do I care?
Because they can teach the real language that people use.
And why do I care about the real language that people use?
Because you want to fit in those situations.
And why do I want to fit in those situations?
Because you want to build your confidence.
Right. Yeah. So often, I don't think we've nailed it there. We've kind of talked off the fly, but you can kind of see just asking those three questions can sometimes help you if you're feeling a bit blocked. See if you can get to a point where you're like, okay, that's the emotional part of why somebody wants to. And I think that's the critical thing is that emotion that you're trying to get into. Great.
Other things, of course, including student testimonials or student stories. Again, people want to see other people like them who have gone through that transformation. And it's very simple to create a story about one of your current or past students, and can be one of the most effective ways of marketing. And of course, like anything, practice makes perfect. So write as many headlines and ad copy as possible and test, test, test.
I like that, Herbert. And in fact, one other kind of practical tip I would give is, of course, test, but test and run it by other people. I think one of the things that I've definitely been guilty of is I spend all this time working in my head trying to create ad copy. And then I'm putting it straight out there. Like, you really need some other human beings to maybe kind of, hey, out of these are the three that I think are the strongest. What do you think? And you could ask any layperson, and they should be able to give you a pretty good indication of like, hey, this seems sensible and short and easy to understand what you want.
Yeah. I also want to give some tips in terms of where to get inspiration from. Like we've talked about some strategies on how to write, but still people need something in front of them. And I think in terms of headlines, the best headlines you will find are in magazines like Cosmopolitan, on the Daily Mail, tabloids. Those are expert copywriters there because they sell the story in the headline. I can't stress that enough. You'll get some fantastic inspirational ideas from magazines and publications like that because they're always
free,
so,
these tabloids.
You want to click.
They're cheap and free, That's what they sell is they sell the sizzle.
Exactly.
So, one actual final thing, I don't know if we kind of spend enough time on, but I think it's super important is just that you have to have just one specific call to action when you're doing ad copy. I've definitely been guilty of it, and B, seen other people be guilty of trying to do too much in one ad. There is one ad, there is one call to action, and everything leads to that. And the headline you should be able to see, hey, I got it. I was drawn to this particular thing, and that the call to action is so clear what I need to do to be able to solve that pain, deal with that emotion, get that thing that I want. But that should be totally clear.
Absolutely.
So, Herbert, we've dealt with quite a lot of both the things that we maybe get wrong and the things that we do right in terms of these strategies, which are calling out the user's problems and desires, making the ads all about them, writing long copy, creating emotion, using a hook, using short, simple words, presenting the benefits and solutions, having one specific call to action. And then you also provided some just simple strategies as well, like using yes questions, using student testimonials, and of course, practice. So you've definitely inspired me. Thank you so much for that, Herbert.
Very welcome.
So thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Get More Students podcast. Now, the goal of this podcast is to give you insights, inspiration, and motivation, particularly for those owners and marketing managers of language schools and tutoring companies. Now, in this episode, we've really dug into how to craft scroll-stopping copy. And if you'd like to get more, subscribe now and get more students for your organization. Thanks very much, and see you next time.
Catch you in the next one.